My husband introduced another woman as his wife before he introduced me as his housekeeper. That was the night I stopped fighting for my marriage. Not because I was weak, not because I had nothing to say, but because by then I had finally understood the truth. Daniel Carter didn't lose me in one day. He lost me slowly, one insult at a time, one excuse at a time, one closed door at a time. But before I tell you about the night he humiliated me in front of 200 people, you need to understand the man he used to be. When I met Daniel, he had nothing but a dream and a secondhand sofa. His apartment was so small that if you opened the refrigerator too quickly, it bumped into the kitchen table. He had one good shirt, one pair of dress shoes, and a notebook filled with sketches of houses he couldn't afford to build. I was 23 then. He was 25. Every night, he would spread papers across the living room floor and talk about luxury homes. Not the kind rich people bought just to impress their friends. The kind families passed down. Homes with meaning, homes with history, homes with rooms where children grew up and grandparents grew old. He used to say, "One day, Victoria, I'm going to build houses people remember." And I believed him. Not because he had money. He didn't. Not because everyone else believed in him. They didn't. I believed him because when Daniel spoke about the future, he made it sound close enough to touch. We got married in a small courthouse ceremony. No designer dress, no luxury reception, just a simple white suit, borrowed earrings, and my mother's old pearl bracelet. Afterward, we bought pizza and ate it on the floor of his apartment because we didn't own a dining table. Daniel held up his paper cup of soda like it was champagne. "To us," he said, "to the empire we're going to build." I laughed. "What empire?" He looked at me with so much certainty. "Ours." For years, it really did feel like ours. I worked full-time as an office administrator. At night, I helped Daniel. I typed proposals, answered emails, balanced invoices, called vendors, scheduled meetings. When clients ignored him, I encouraged him. When investors laughed, I reminded him why he started. When the bank rejected him for the third time, he came home, sat on the edge of the bed, and buried his face in his hands. "I can't keep asking you to live like this," he whispered. I sat beside him. "You didn't ask me." I took his hand. "I chose you." He cried that night, not loudly, just silently, with his forehead against mine. "I swear, Victoria, if I ever make it, everyone will know I couldn't have done it without you." For a long time, he kept that promise. 8 years later, the dream we'd spent so many nights talking about had finally come true. Daniel's first luxury development sold out in record time. Then another, then another. Soon his phone never stopped ringing. Investors who once ignored him were suddenly asking for meetings. Banks that once rejected his applications were offering him credit. For the first time in our lives, we weren't worrying about bills. We bought our first beautiful home. Nothing extravagant. Just a place we could finally call ours. Daniel still looked at me the same way. He still kissed me before every meeting. He still introduced me proudly. "This is my wife, Victoria, the smartest person I know." Every time he said it, I smiled, because I knew he meant it. But success has a strange way of introducing people to new worlds. Daniel started attending exclusive networking events, private golf clubs, luxury charity dinners, developer conferences, people with expensive watches, perfect smiles, and opinions about everything. One evening, he came home carrying several expensive shopping bags. "I bought these for you." Inside were designer dresses, luxury handbags, shoes that cost more than our first month's rent. I laughed. "You spent all this money?" He smiled. "I just thought, you deserve nicer things." I thanked him. But the next weekend, I wore one of my own dresses instead. Simple, elegant, comfortable, Daniel stared at me. You aren't wearing the new one? I smiled. I like this one. He forced a smile back, then quietly said, You've got to understand. People notice these things now. I didn't think much of it, until he started saying things like that more often. Maybe let a stylist help you. Everyone's wife dresses differently. You could wear your hair another way. Image matters. I always answered the same way. I'm happy exactly as I am. At first, he would laugh. Then he stopped laughing. One evening, we were invited to a private dinner with investors. As I picked up my purse, Daniel cleared his throat. I think I'm just going to go alone tonight. I looked at him. Oh, I thought we were both invited. We were. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's mostly business. You'd probably be bored. I nodded. Okay. When he got home that night, he smelled like expensive perfume. Not mine. I didn't ask questions. Not because I was afraid of the answers, because I wasn't ready to hear them. Months became years. Daniel's company became one of the biggest luxury developers in the city. Magazine covers, television interviews, award ceremonies. Everywhere we went, people recognized him, but fewer people knew I was his wife. Not because they forgot, because Daniel slowly stopped telling them. 3 years later, the man I married was becoming harder to recognize. The changes were so small, most people wouldn't have noticed. I noticed every single one. At first, he stopped holding my hand in public. Then, he stopped asking me to stand beside him in photographs. Then, he started arriving at events before me. Eventually, he stopped inviting me altogether. Every excuse sounded reasonable. This one's just for investors. This one's mostly networking. This one's business. I believed him until the night he said something I'll never forget. We've got clients coming over tonight. He looked uncomfortable. Would you mind making yourself scarce for a few hours? I frowned. What do you mean? They're important people. I just don't want any distractions. I smiled softly. Of course. I spent the evening upstairs. I could hear laughter below. Music, glasses clinking, someone playing the piano. I waited. Surely he'd come get me. He never did. The next morning, I asked how the evening went. It was great. He never even realized I'd waited. Weeks later, another dinner. Could you stay upstairs tonight? Another gala. I'll meet you there. Another event. These clients expect something different. I finally asked, what exactly do they expect? Daniel looked away. I don't know. Just a different image. That was the first time I realized he wasn't embarrassed by something I'd done. He was embarrassed by me. Not because I'd changed, because I hadn't. Around the same time, a young woman started appearing beside Daniel. Beautiful, confident, always dressed in the newest designer collections. She wasn't loud. She wasn't rude. She simply looked exactly like the world Daniel now wanted to belong to. I watched photographs appear online. Industry dinners, charity events, private club openings. She was always beside him. People assumed she was his wife. Daniel never corrected them. I tried to save our marriage. I planned anniversary dinners. He canceled. I booked a weekend away. He said he was too busy. I wrote him a letter. Not angry, not accusing, just honest. I told him, I miss the man who used to dance with me in our tiny apartment. Weeks later, I found the letter, still sitting exactly where I'd left it, unopened. I stood there holding it in my hands, and for the first time, I wondered if my husband had already left our marriage. Long before I realized I was standing in it alone. The charity gala was unlike anything I'd ever attended. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers crowded the red carpet. Business leaders, celebrities, politicians. Everyone important in the city seemed to be there. Daniel had insisted we arrive separately. It'll just be easier. I didn't argue. By then, I had stopped asking questions I already knew the answers to. As I walked into the ballroom, I saw him immediately, standing near the stage, laughing, a champagne glass in one hand. The young woman beside him wore a sparkling designer gown. People surrounded them, smiling, congratulating them. One guest shook Daniel's hand. "You two make a beautiful couple." Daniel smiled. "Thank you." He never corrected him. My heart sank, not because he had lied, because he didn't even hesitate. I stood quietly near the back of the room, hoping maybe he'd come over. Maybe he'd introduce me properly. Maybe. Just maybe. The man I married was still somewhere inside him. Then another guest noticed me. She smiled politely. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've met." She looked at Daniel. "And who is she?" Daniel barely turned his head. He looked at me for only a second. Then he laughed. "Oh, she's just the housekeeper." Several people chuckled politely. One man smiled. "You've got an incredible house." "I was just telling Daniel how beautifully it's run." Another woman nodded. "You're lucky to have someone so dedicated." Daniel simply smiled. He didn't correct them. He didn't even look at me. In that moment, 20 years of memories passed through my mind. The tiny apartment, the pizza on moving boxes, the nights we stayed awake chasing impossible dreams, the promises, the sacrifices, the tears, the victories, every single one of them, reduced to one sentence. "She's the housekeeper." I smiled, not because I was okay, because I refused to let anyone there see me break. I quietly placed my champagne glass on a nearby table, picked up my purse, and walked out. Daniel never followed me. That night, for the first time, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I packed one suitcase. Daniel watched me from the kitchen. "Where are you going?" I looked at him calmly. "A place where people know my name." He frowned. "You're seriously leaving?" I nodded. "You already left. You just forgot to tell me." Then I walked out the front door. He never tried to stop me. I think he believed I'd be back. He thought I was upset. He had no idea. I was gone for good. 6 months later, I started hearing things. Friends we still had in common would call every now and then. I never asked about Daniel, but somehow, his name always came up. The first thing I heard was that the new house manager had quit after only 3 weeks. Then another one left. Then another. The staff couldn't stop arguing. Deliveries kept going missing. Important meetings were forgotten. His parents missed doctor's appointments because nobody remembered to schedule them. The charity events I'd spent years organizing quietly fell apart. Even simple things. Birthdays, client dinners, travel plans. Everything seemed to be falling apart. That's when Daniel finally realized something. I had never just managed a house. I'd been quietly holding together every part of his life. By then, I'd already started over. A retired philanthropist had offered me the opportunity to manage his private estate. It wasn't nearly as large as Daniel's mansion, but it felt different, peaceful, respectful. For the first time in years, people valued my work instead of taking it for granted. Every morning I'd greet the household staff, review the day's schedule, make sure everything ran smoothly, and somehow, coming to work didn't feel like a burden. It felt like home. Then one afternoon, as I was walking back toward the main house, one of the staff members hurried over to me. "Mrs. Carter, there's a gentleman here asking to see you." I looked toward the front gate, and there he was, Daniel, standing beside his car. For a moment, I barely recognized him. The expensive suit was still there. The luxury watch was still there. But the confidence, the arrogance, the man who believed success made him better than everyone else, was gone. He walked toward me slowly, stopped a few feet away. looked down at the ground, then finally said, "I made a terrible mistake." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked up. His eyes were full of regret. I was blind. I spent years chasing status. And in the process, I lost the one person who never cared whether I was rich or poor. I need you. For just a moment, I saw the young man from our tiny apartment, the man who used to sketch luxury homes on our kitchen table while I typed business proposals beside him, the man who once held my hand and promised, "No matter what happens, we'll build this life together." I loved that man with everything I had, but the man standing in front of me wasn't him anymore. I smiled sadly. "No, you don't need me. You need the woman you should have appreciated before success convinced you she wasn't enough." His eyes filled with tears. "When did I lose you?" I looked at him quietly. "The day you became embarrassed by the woman who was never embarrassed by you." I turned around, walked back toward the estate, without looking back. As I reached the front steps, the staff welcomed me inside with warm smiles. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I truly belonged. Daniel remained standing there, alone, watching me disappear through the front doors. Money had brought him everything he thought he wanted, but it had cost him the only person who loved him before any of it existed, and that is a price no billionaire can ever afford to pay.